and 20, sorry. We also have the I-4, some improvements there, adding turn lanes. This is near County Line Road. And then some intelligent transportation systems. This is the Gandy Bridge in Dale Mabry area to the Gandy Bridge. This will add technology to help alleviate construction and move traffic through once the current project is completed. As far as our real choices, again, these are our trail projects. We have the Green Spine cycle track. This is the furthest west and the furthest east components, both funded for construction in FY20. We then have, again, the West River Greenway with the Stewart Middle School connector. This is construction in 24. And then the South Coast Greenway. This is the Big Bend pedestrian overpass. This is going to design to feed into the interchange improvements that the county is working on. And this is also the first bit of Sun Trail money that we received within Hillsborough County. Our major investments, I-75 at Gibsonton Interchange. This continues to be a very important project to move forward. We were able to get the I-75 at Big Bend advanced last year. So we're working with the county and the state to continue to get this advanced as much as possible. So far, we have the design slated in fiscal year 20. We have also added this to the regional priority list to hope that that will help advance the ultimate rebuild as well. As far as where we are with Tampa Bay Next is sort of the current status update. We have the I-275, the Howard Franklin Bridge. This has been fully funded on the Hillsborough side, which accounts for about $54 million. This is design build fiscal year 20, so shortly. We have the State Road 60 West Shore Interchange. This is for design build in fiscal year 24. Again, $1.4 billion from the state to complete this project. And then we have the I-275 from Lois to Willow. This will be the sort of receiving and exit express lanes from the West Shore Interchange, and will stop west of the Hillsborough River. And this again is $442 million for design build in fiscal year 24 and 25. As far as the downtown interchange goes, we have partial funding for some of the operational improvements. This will sort of be the $48 million is for construction in 21 to be the receiving lane for the traffic coming from I-4 to I-275 northbound. We then have the I-275 north of downtown. This is still slated for the add 2 lanes that was included in the long range transportation plan. This is slated for design in fiscal year 21. I keep this map in here just for your reference so that as a reminder for the sort of segment numbers of the TV Next program. All right, so now we're going to start to discuss the Cip priorities.
Like such as swimwear, sunglasses are also discounted.
Projects that are different between the last fiscal year and this fiscal year.
Swimwear over there, I never.
This will be looking at projects that are not currently funded or completely funded for all phases within the work program we just reviewed. So again, we tie our prioritization process directly to our long-range transportation plan. We have our performance programs. The first 4, we sort of get each of the priorities and partner.
Decide what?
And depending on the project.
Oh.
Sarah, this is Wade. Can you hold on one second, please? I cannot see that anybody other than you is unmuted and me now. But If you'd like to go ahead and try and start again, let's see if we're okay.
Sorry. Like I was saying, based on the type of priorities project we get, that is tied to the program, and then we have the ranking categories within there. The first one is good repair and resiliency, so it's looking at the current level of service for transit to maintain that, as well as our bridges and resurfacing. Our Vision Zero looks at total crashes as well as severe crashes and crashes per mile. We then have our smart cities that's looking at our travel time reliability. Our real choices when not driving looks at our density rating based on population and jobs. So which routes or trail corridors provide the most accessibility to the population and jobs. And then our major investments also looks at our major job centers and those densities, as well as forecasted traffic congestion, and then the amount of delay reduction. As far as the process that we go through for updating the CIP priorities, again, these are updated with the work program, so they were updated last June. And then early in February, we sort of start what we call our world tour, where we go to each of the jurisdictions and partner agencies, and we meet with them to discuss their previous priorities as well as any new priorities. Once we get through this process, the jurisdictions are asked to provide a updated priority letter every year about March 15th. From there, if there are any new priorities that require grant applications, those are to be provided to either us or FDOT by March 31st for inclusion. And then we, like we are right now, May and June, present these to each of the committees for review. I do want to note this year we did hold a workshop with our policy committee March 24th, where we discussed the priorities that we received thus far this year. All right. As far as our new priority requests this year, we did receive a few. This year we have the T-Bar to Van pool. This was a request for $800,000 in fiscal year 26. We're recommending instead that $200,000 be provided annually. We again, the Inner Bay Boulevard, this is West Shore to Bay Shore. This is a safety project that was requested by the City of Tampa in conjunction with Hillsborough County. And this was a request for 4.5 million for those improvements. And we have a similar request on Twigs from Ashley, Nebraska. Again, City of Tampa jointly with Hillsborough County for about just over 3 million for those improvements. We have State Road 574, also known as MLK, from US 301 to Turkey Creek. This is a large corridor or long corridor, and this is looking at multiple safety improvements, new medians, bike lanes, filling in sidewalk gaps, ADA improvements, as well as innovative intersections and lighting along the corridor. And this was requested by FDOT. In red, we do have one request that we received recently from the city, and this is what we're calling, as of now, the North Downtown Grid Multimodal Improvements, also known as Ashley Drive at the 275 off-ramp on the west side of downtown. This is looking at safety improvements, and they're seeking 5.2 million of our STP funds that we prioritize, and this will sort of be done as quote unquote goes with project as the 275 ramps coming into downtown are modified through some of the TV Next updates. Additional new priorities to be included. We have 2 traffic signals that were requested by the city of Tampa. One is at State Road 60 Adamo at 26th Street, and then the other is at Spruce Boy Scout at Manhattan Avenue. We then have some intersection improvements on State Road 60 from Dover to the Polk County line. This is looking at intersection improvements and safety upgrades. They're requesting PD&E at this time. We have a HART request for a CSX study. This is sort of the first phase of moving forward with any talks with CSX or negotiations. We also have the Fowler Avenue Underpass PD&E that was requested by Temple Terrace. And then HART had a couple more, the electric bus and electric bus infrastructure, the automated vehicles and facilities infrastructure. As far as our regional priorities, we do have the Chair's Coordinating Committee of the MPOs is sort of leading the regional way at this point. We have numerous funded projects that I've already gone through, as far as Hillsborough County, the Howard Franklin Bridge, the Big Bend and I-75 interchange, the West Shore interchange. As far as the unfunded priorities, again, I-75 at Gibsonton, the I-275 operational improvements north of downtown, and then the regional rapid transit and the I-275 corridor. This is that T-BARTA project that is currently underway. And then again, supporting HART and any negotiations and right-of-way negotiations with CSX. So with that, if you have any questions, we do have a recommended action tonight. This is again, sort of 2-in-1. You can do it as one motion or 2 if you'd like. We have approved the Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal year 21 through 25. And then also to approve the Transportation Improvement Program priorities for future funding. So with that, if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Mr. Shirk, are you able to unmute yourself? There you are.
Now I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Also, my camera is frozen too.
Apologies.
You may be experiencing. Say again? Yeah. There we go. Anyway, thank you very much, Sarah. As everybody's aware, and not the least of the fact that we're aware that we're talking from each, talking from our dining room tables. At least I am. The COVID-19 crisis has thrown all of our expectations into a cocked hat, and the fact that we're pretty much all these transportation decisions are being based on 1995 activity. I mean, there are people who are, who've got their doctorates now who weren't born when that thing was activated. I'd like to recommend or request that FDOT reappraise projections of transportation need in light of the fact that a lot of people aren't going to be going back to work at their old office downtown. A lot of people aren't going to be going back to schools downtown. A lot of people aren't going to be going in the period between January and March. We saw a 60% reduction in vehicle miles traveled, and some of that's going to come back. Some of it's already come back, but not, but it's not going to come back all the way. And we're spending obscene amounts of money in the $3 billion range to accommodate traffic that may never show up. So I have some recommendations, some requests I'd like to put before the committee to get a vote on them. And the first is my request for FDOT reappraise transportation growth and wipe the scales off their eyes, because it's a new world out there. Specific items, I'd like to move to strike items 31 and 32, TB Next expansion, until we have some better handle on what future growth is going to be, not what we want it to be. Those are 3 requests, and I'd like to entertain that in the form, if someone wants to move that forward, please feel free.
And thank you, Jim. This is Wade. I just want to let anybody know if they're unable to unmute themselves, please type it into the chat box and I will work on it. Thank you.
Okay.
Jim, it's Peter Davitt here. Can you hear me? All right. I'm willing to entertain I'm willing to entertain the first part where we ask them to reevaluate based on what has happened, in the last 3 months here in Florida and the rest of the world. I don't know if it's being short-sighted to say that it's never going to come back. I think it's going to come back and the traffic's going to come back and be worse than ever. And if we sit back and we don't plan now, I see these things go out to 2045. When are we going to do it? That's where my head's at. I'd be willing to support a motion to have them reevaluate based on current statistics and how things are. I don't know about striking the other 2 things. I think they'd either be victims of the new report or they'd go forward. I don't know about that.
This is Sally.
Yes, Sally.
I agree with what you're saying, that it may come out in the report that would not. I'm not really sure that getting specific is something that we really should do, but I do think the report should be reevaluated.
Okay.
Or reappraised, or whatever the right word is. Or I think they're 2 different actions.
Okay. Let's go with the first one then, to request the DOT to reevaluate future transportation needs in light of a probable shift away from downtown. And I know that's not going to downtown property owners real happy, but it's, let's live with reality. The other thing that makes this sort of imperative is we saw what happens when you get too much road space. I remember driving down I-275 southbound and having some bozo pass me doing over 100 miles an hour, and give people a racetrack, and by golly, they're going to race on it. So I think, my fear is that I'm rather more concerned about building too much transportation capacity with all the costs that entails versus building too little and having congestion, because congestion corrects itself in other ways. Some not good, some good.
Can Richard Rank speak to what his chat says? Because if we wanted to talk about reevaluating, what would be the time frame and how would we do it? And do we just not consider what's going on right now? Rich, can you?
Yeah, I've typed in that 3 months or even 8 months or a year of atypical travel patterns. Doesn't give you enough data to future traffic protection out to the year 2045. The traffic model.
Rich, we're having a hard time hearing you.
All right, that's why I typed it in chat, because I know that this forum is not doesn't allow me to speak very succinctly. So what I stated in my chat box, stands. I don't think that there's enough data that warrants, nor could DOT reevaluate based off of atypical travel patterns. So,
So does that mean we just ignore what's going on right now? Or when does it get reevaluated?
Every 5 years, the LRTP is developed, and every 5 years, you get a new set of background data to help adjust your population and your traffic projections. I honestly, you can throw out, yeah, we need to make adjustments based off of what's going on. And sure, this has been a significant downturn in travel patterns. I don't remember what happened during the, during the recession or the Great Recession 10 years ago. That adjusted numbers down, but that was after, a couple of years of background data was obtained. And so then traffic projections were able to be adjusted as a result. So I think it's a little unwise to try to make adjustments now with so little data that's available based off of COVID-19.
This is Sarah. Rich, if I might add, they did also have a similar motion discussion at the CAC meeting. There was, after quite a bit of discussion, some consensus that whatever analysis would come out of this would be a request of FDOT, and it would probably be in the future, so not within the year or so, but a longer time frame to really get an idea of the full set of impact and a full set of data. So that was just some insight in what was discussed at the CAC meeting.
Now, what that tells us is that things may change, and I think we ought to pause on spending billions that frankly we're not going to have, because state and local revenues are going really down, and they're going to be down for a long time. I'd rather spend that $3 billion on other rather more vital needs than speeding people from New Tampa to downtown. If it takes pausing it for a year, I don't think that's going to hurt anybody. It's already getting paused for maybe more than that because of the downtown caused by the COVID-19. So let's just hold off until we know where we're going with this thing. I don't think that, draw a straight line on a semi-log curve and say that's going to be what's going to be. I think we need to have a serious discussion about where we're going and where America's going, where the country's going. But that's a little too localized or a little too expensive just for ourselves. Let's make sure that we're not spending money that could be much better spent elsewhere to just because of we have a historical record. I've been doing population and projections and wastewater projections for 50 years. And one of the things I learned early on is that for every year in the future, there's a 1% divergence from the projection. But the thing is, you don't know if it's a divergence up or down. I've seen cities that were growing like wildfire suddenly come to a halt because local industry changed. I've seen other things like that. And frankly, population projections are as much PR as anything else. I think we need to slow this process down and take a look at where we're going to go with it.
I would ask another question, please. This is Sally. If we don't approve it, what does that do? If we do approve it, are we stuck with this plan because we've approved it?
Sally, to my way of thinking, if we say, okay, we'll stop this process when the giant snowball is halfway down the hill, it's not a really realistic process. In other words, we have to stop it before it starts rolling down the hill.
Except we're just making a recommendation to the TIP. How important a recommendation of the TIP? What jurisdiction or whatever what clout do we have, so to speak?
You are an advisory committee to the board, and you can make motions for amendments to the work program, and then approve it with those motions.
Thank you, Sarah. Therefore, my request stands. I'd entertain a request to reevaluate the projection of transportation need to find out if we're deliberately overbuilding just because we don't have any other answers to our problems, or we don't like the other answers to our problems.
Does that mean you're not recommending approval, or you're recommending approval pending reevaluation?
Recommending approval pending our modifications.
Everyone, this is Wade. We can certainly take individual motions on each of those, one being the reappraising the transportation growth forecasts and Jim, maybe you need to clarify that the TBX segments are based on, or that everything in the work program is based on. And then number 2 and maybe number 3, we could take individual motions on striking number 31 and 32 from which are the TB Next segments from the document.
Definitely request that FDOT reevaluate the regional transportation issues, and that means that they need to look at all of our assumptions and where we're going with this. As far as taking segment items 31 and 32, I would recommend that we request that they be deferred until we have the results of the evaluation.
So does that mean you're recommending approval pending reevaluation and deferring 31 and 32 until the reevaluation is done?
Yes.
I could second that. Do you need a second? Is that what?
Actually, I need somebody to make the motion because I can't.
Okay, I'll make that motion. Don't ask me what it is. I can't. For discussion.
For clarification, that motion would be to reappraise the transportation growth regionally by FDOT and defer items 31 and 32 until after that reevaluation is done.
Well, we're recommending approval of the plan pending reevaluation. I don't know what that means. I'm not quite sure. We have to go forward with the plan, right? Or do we?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, we could recommend not approving it.
Well, I'm not prepared to go that far.
Okay. Then
I don't know what anybody else is, you know, but I think the comments that you're making with respect to the issues, it's pretty important right now. So I don't know.
Okay.
I agree with Sally. This is Diana Ramirez. I agree with Sally. The changes that we are experiencing right now are, for now, are not permanent, but we're going to have permanent changes, like you said, Jim. I agree. I don't think 100% of the population who used to drive are going to go back, but I don't think we are ready to say no to moving forward. However, I do agree with the fact that we're changing and that we need to reevaluate to make sure that we're going to, well, at least to some extent, we're never sure of anything, as we know now, at least to some extent, to ensure that the funds are spent where are going to be needed with the changes. So a reevaluation, an approval pending reevaluation, I do agree with that. I don't want to take anything out of the table yet, though.
Okay, then let's do as Wade suggested and do the reevaluation first and move on that and vote on its approval. And then we can discuss deferring action or delaying action on TB next improvements till it's documented that we need them.
I have a question for Sarah.
Yes.
Sarah, this is Peter Davitt. The money, this federal money and the state money that we see, which are quite significant over the local money, is this money of a timetable or something like if we don't use it, we don't get it, it goes somewhere else?
It's ultimately up to the MPO board on whether or not to authorize the use of the funds. Your vote would be an advisory I guess, recommendation to the MPO board. I do want to just one caveat that the work program section that we're discussing tonight has hundreds of projects in it, including lots of walk bike safety and other projects. And what you're discussing is the modification of 2 projects. So just keep that in mind when discussing whether or not to approve the work program and all or total for the MPO board.
All right, but that doesn't answer my question to you. My question to you was the money that's out there, the state and the federal money that we saw in the budgets, will that money go away if we don't use it?
I don't, what do you mean by if we don't use it?
Well, if something were to, if we were to, you know, choose to vote this down, and for whatever reason, some of these projects got postponed or didn't happen because of that, the money that was coming from the federal or state governments in your budget projections, would that money still come to us for something else, which Jim wants to do something with some of the money, or is that money specifically tied to transportation projects, and either we spend the money that we hope to get or we don't get it at all?
Well, like I said, that ultimate decision comes to the MPO board on whether or not to accept those monies. If they decide to, and like I said at the beginning of the presentation, if they decide to remove a project, meaning removing those funding, it would either go back to the feds or to the state for reallocation, and we're not guaranteed those monies back to either our district or our county. It could go wherever is needed. The way we were able to get the West Shore Interchange funded was a large regional effort where we were able to show the state and the federal government that we were all working together as one to move that project forward. So there's sort of a few layers within the answer to your question. But no, we cannot dictate where those funds would go or if they would even come back to our region.
All right, I understand that. Thank you.
I think we're just making an advisory. We don't have any, we serve as an advisory committee. So we may say, pending reevaluation of the issues, and MPO may say, well, too bad, we're going to go ahead and recommend it as Sarah presented it. So I think we're going on record saying that we have this concern, but I'm not sure how much that's going to affect the overall plan. Am I correct?
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I'm finished.
It just shows that we're taking a stand, even though they come back to us and say, well, too bad, we're still making a stand.
Yeah. That's sort of the way I look at it.
Yeah, and when I present this to the board, as I do every year, there will be a slide towards the end before in your recommendation showing the breakdown of the recommendations for each of the committees. Like I said, CAC had some similar discussion and recommendations, and then ultimately approved the rest of the plan. So, like I said, you're free to make recommendations. I just want to remind you that the work program section has a lot more in it than just the 2 projects that you've discussed so far. So I want to make sure that if there's support for those projects, that moves forward as well.
Okay, Sarah, my problem with the whole process is that we're talking about essentially chump change for all of the things that we're interested in, and billions for the things that we think need to be reevaluated. I'm not saying that our stuff is more important. I'm just saying it's the cost of it's minuscule compared to the massive effort that's being plugged into TV Next. And you know, we can say let's recommend everything move forward just like we do, but request reevaluation and request a delay in implementing items 31 and 32 until we have better documentation. Because frankly, the planning was done in '95, and it was a lot different then. We didn't care. Right now, we seem to care a little bit more about the impact on disadvantaged populations than we did in '95 when we actively sought to pave over where they lived. So I think we need to reevaluate where we're going with this, period.
And yeah, those, like I said, those comments that you brought up are consistent with what was discussed at CAC.
Maybe if enough people start talking about it, we'll get a true reevaluation and reappraisal.
Hey, this is Beth, the MPO director, and I could add a couple of notes if you're interested.
Please.
Just a couple of thoughts. One is that we've been working with the DOT on the Gulf Coast Connector Trail, and the fact that it would need to have a better connection across from West Shore to downtown and connect the Courtney Campbell Causeway Trail to the downtown Riverwalk. And so there is the potential for that project with the Dale Mabry pedestrian overpass to be included in that plan and that construction project for I-275 downtown. And there are other opportunities that I think we can work with the Department of Transportation on, but I think that is the most specific one, and so I would for your support for that particular project.
By and large, I really have. I'm in favor of pretty much all of the sort of peripheral projects, specifically all the things that improve safety, all the Vision Zero projects, all the things that improve walk bike, and all the things that improve bicycling connectivity in general. But my question is, they're really very, very minor in comparison to the amount of money that's going to be spent on TB Next. And I'd like to find a way to reevaluate the need for TB Next in light of where we think the county is going to be going and the region is going to be going. Anything that will, anything that we can do that would accomplish that to me, is the way we want to go.
Sarah, this is Diana again. Are there plans already drawn for TV Next? Do you know? I mean, like actual plan sheets and design to determine what is going to be.
There are design plans for the West Shore Interchange, the Howard Franklin Bridge, and segment 5 just east of the the West Shore interchange. The downtown interchange is the limited operational and safety improvements that were approved in the long-range transportation plan. And those are not in final design. There's some concepts for that. And then the I-275 north of downtown, that is only funded at this point for a design phase. But that is adding the 2 lanes in each, or 1 lane in each direction. So.
Okay, my question is, because I know Jim is very concerned about spending money that we might not need it in places we might not need it. However, knowing DOT and knowing us, we're very resilient. And projects come at DOT and they come with an idea. Once it gets into design and things have changed, DOT is very resilient. They change things as they need it. From my experience, I work at DOT over 10 years, close to 13. And a lot of projects that I work on came in with one idea. As we progressed through it, it was more, it converted, it totally changed to accommodate what it was needed at the time that the project was going on, even though the project was in the books for 20 years or more, or 10 years. So I think we're not losing if we approve it, because as the project progresses, we will have things to say, like they're gonna study the need for the bicycles and sidewalks and pedestrians and completed streets as they progress through the design of the project. That's my take from what I'm coming from. I'm not saying that Jim doesn't have a real concern. I have it too, because we have changed, like I said. But I think we're probably gonna lose more if we don't approve it than if we approve it. That's what I'm gonna say for now. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Ms. Ramirez. And I know that you and I worked on a project that wound up making a change on 301. So I appreciate what you're saying. But anyway, I would, at a minimum, I think we need to request that reevaluation of the need for a widening of I-275 from the downtown interchange to Beers.
So what are we doing? We're talking about reevaluating issues, but now you're getting specific. Are we going to do more general or more specific, or what?
I don't know. I'd like somebody from the MPO to weigh in on this, or from planning.
Jim, this is great. Certainly, you all can make motions to reappraise the projected growth in transportation to find out if we still, at the end of this, believe we will have the numbers 20 years from now that we are projecting to have, and that some of these improvements are based on. The other part of it, specifically items 31 and 32, those are the list of project priorities that are candidates for new funding. If I may, I'll share my screen real quick, Sarah, and folks can see those real quick as well. Second. Let's see. Can you all see those now? The 2 projects there. Those are specifically the numbers 31 and 32. Is that correct, Jim?
That's correct.
So the recommendation, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is to reappraise the projected growth in transportation and reevaluate numbers 31 and 32 as a result of that for their prioritization on this table.
That's correct.
But that's not to preclude other things being concerned, but these specific ones were the ones that are being concerned.
Yeah. Yes to Wade and yes to Sally. When the projection of transportation needs pretty much has to be sort of more of a countywide or regional issue, and how that evolves or devolves onto certain specific projects is perhaps best addressed separately. The main thing is to get a good evaluation of where we're going, what our needs are going to be before we say, okay, let's just do something we thought was a great idea in 1995.
But then the other thing that I'm wondering is what Beth had talked about with respect to the trail from Courtney Campbell downtown in conjunction with, I mean, that's something I'm particularly interested in, and I don't know if that's included in there anywhere.
So those would be
Wade, where's that specific item?
Those would be the segments from the West Shore interchange to the downtown interchange there, which are sort of the where the toll lanes would terminate if you were either east or westbound, somewhere around Willow or Rome Avenue. So that whole segment from the Riverwalk to the Courtney Campbell Causeway or Cypress is really where the trail ends right now.
So that would be included in the plan, or could be?
I don't believe that those are affected by numbers 31 and 32.
No. I understand that. I guess I changed subjects, or I expanded. I said we're getting specific on two things, but this other thing was mentioned by Beth that I'm interested in particular. So I don't know where that fits in, and I don't know whether she was suggesting we might want to add that or what. Maybe Beth can speak to that.
Sure. This is Beth, and as I understand it, the Section 5 project, and so Section 5 of Tampa Bay Next is between West Shore and downtown, and so we've been looking at how that will play out. Right now, that is proposed as an extension of the Section 4 project, which is the West Shore Interchange. So the West Shore Interchange would have lanes, kind of coming out from it and dispersing traffic to and from the West Shore area, going up into the Veterans Expressway and the Courtney Campbell Causeway and the Howard Franklin Bridge. It would also disperse traffic towards the downtown Tampa area. And so the question is, as this area is rebuilt, would it include the trail connection that would create that very important connection for the Gulf Coast Trail between the Courtney Campbell Causeway Trail and the part of the trail along the South Coast Greenway. And part of that is the pedestrian overpass at Del Mabry Highway, which it's not an inexpensive project. And so having that included in the DOT's work program is very valuable. And at this time, our understanding is that it is included, that trail overpass would in fact be part of that continuous connection across from like Cypress Point Park over to the downtown Tampa Riverwalk.
So we don't need to add anything.
I
No,
don't know.
I don't. I also believe that if we request that they reevaluate transportation needs, that they should also include a reevaluation of non-motorized transportation needs, because frankly, as a bike person, I've seen an incredible increase in bicycling, and I think a lot of people are, if they have the option of either taking a bike or taking a bus, they're going to wind up taking a bike if they can, because we've seen it in New York City where people are avoiding the hell out of mass transit, and they're trying to get they're using bicycles rather than trying to drive cars. And so I think if we're looking at impact of changes, maybe we'll want to emphasize the pedestrian bike cut overpass on Dale Mabry. And yes, I realize it's not a cheap thing. It's probably in the what's the estimate say in the $30 million range?
I think so.
How much? Anyway, it's not a small number, but it pales in consequence compared to 31 and 32.
Hey, Jim,
All right,
can I
I can
throw
make a
something out there?
Can I make a motion?
Jim,
Yes.
my name's Peter Davitt. I'd like to speak first before you make your motion.
Sure.
I'm the member who's representing Temple Terrace. So we're north and east of a lot of you, South Tampa, Seminole Heights people. I get very little discretion or very little direction from the town as to what they want me to do. So what I'm going to say is a personal statement, but we moved here from New Jersey, 5 years ago. We picked Temple Terrace because it's about a 20-minute ride into the city. So we could be out of the city and into the city in a reasonable amount of time. So that includes 275, it includes Fowler, Fletcher, Bush, all those roads. So I'm looking at number 32, and they're talking about a flyover, which is going to take people onto I-4 from 275 south. Well, if you ever drive south on 275 and you watch the chaos that happens at I-4, you can't imagine why there's not 2 lanes there already. I mean, these people back up for half a mile, then the next lane over, they come down and they dive in at the end. And then the third lane, those people dive in 2 lanes at the end, and everybody else is hoping we don't get in the middle of an accident. So a much safer improvement is needed in that stretch. So I would definitely not be opposed to number 32 whatsoever. There may be parts of it that have to do with Ybor City or stuff like that I'm not conversant on, but I can tell you that I-4 exit, that's a disaster any time of day.
Okay. Then maybe there should be, maybe FDOT should take that out of that improvement off, out of the overall segment and find something that's more appropriate, let's say. And yeah, I totally agree with you, because I live at the intersection of near Martin Luther King and I-275, and I have to fight that every time I go southbound. It's the tailback comes as far as north as as Martin Luther King entrance or entrance ramp. So one thing I think we can all agree on safely that we need to reevaluate our transportation needs in light of the changes wrought by COVID-19. And maybe let's reserve the other part for further discussion later.
Okay.
Okay.
So we need a motion to approve the plan but we'd also want them to reevaluate transportation needs because of COVID-19.
That's my understanding. Sarah, is that true?
If that's the motion you wish to make.
Okay. Can I get someone to make that motion? Like I say, I can't make it.
I'll make that motion.
Need a second?
It.
Okay, is that you, Bill?
That's Peter Davitt.
Peter, what exit, by the way?
Pardon?
No, that's a New Jersey joke.
63.
13C, Jersey City.
Jeez.
That's Turnpike.
Yeah. You're talking Parkway.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so we have a motion and a second. Is it tacit agreement? And if somebody would like to step up and say no, please do.
I see at least one nay on the chat. Feel free to chime in with or ask for yays and then nays if you like, Jen.
This is Linda. I had a quick question.
Jem, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it okay if Linda asks a question?
Oh, certainly.
Okay, I'm just to reiterate, because I heard a lot of conversation back and forth. We're approving the plan with the request to FDOT to do a reevaluation of looking at how COVID and how recent activities affect the outcome of their studies. Is that correct? So it is an approval of the plan.
That's my understanding. Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
As well, Linda. Well, Jim, I guess we should either ask for a roll call vote or ask everybody to vote individually in the chat.
Let's ask, can we do a roll call quickly?
Sharon, are you on? Could you do that?
Yes, I can. Carla Price?
Nay.
John Marsh? He was a yay. I see it in the comments. Are Steve and Calvin here? Them. Mr. Davitt?
Yes.
Jason Jackman?
Yay.
Elaine Watson? He's a yes. Katrina?
Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Wade, I wasn't sure, since I work for Plan Hillsborough, I mean, should I abstain or should I vote?
You can vote.
Yes, you can vote.
Okay. I vote yay.
Linda Crescentini?
Yay.
Jim Shirk?
Yes.
Tim Horse?
I vote yay.
Rafael Hernandez? I believe he was a yes.
Yay.
Richard Johnson? I don't believe he's here. Jamie?
Yes.
She's a yes. Okay. Holly Simmons?
Yes.
Mr. Forbes is not here. Faye Miller? Faye Miller? Wanda Vinson? John Kubecki? He's a yes. Sally
Yes.
Thompson is a yes. Paul Pramberger, I don't believe is here. Diana Ramirez.
Oh, yes.
Yes, okay. Richard Rank, I believe, is a no. From what I saw. And Allison? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. We have 15 yeses.
Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome, and 3 no's.
All right. Well, thank you. Jim, are you ready to move forward?
Say again?
Shall we move on?
Yeah, let's move on.
Excuse me 1 second. All right. Paula, I will just make you the presenter. All right. Apologies, Paula. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
There you go. I kept pressing the button.
Thanks. Sorry.
That's okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Paula Benway with Greenman Peterson and the consultant for the MPO, and I'm going to be giving you really brief clip notes of the expensive package that you already have received on the Speed Management Action Plan. Get my slides here. So just quickly brief through it. We had a simple goal, which is to save lives through road improvements. We want to make sure that we improve conditions for all users, increase awareness of the dangers of speeding and aggressive driving. We want to institutionalize a lot of good practices that make sure that we can achieve some of these goals. And then also identify supportive policies, programs, and even enforcement. But we can't do any of that without our cooperation and support from all the various partners in this effort. So the study, if you remember, even from my first presentation, we have several tasks. I'm going to go through some of these very, very quickly because I want to spend more time towards the end. So the first one was the public engagement or stakeholder engagement that we had. Here's all the different partners that went through this journey with us. We met 3 times over the last year and a half in May, last May, October, and just this past May. But these partners were very critical to the formulation of this plan. You know, they had identified not only prioritization factors as those listed on this particular slide, but they also, you know, shared with us their story, some of their countermeasures that they've been already applying in some of the quarters that we talk about, but also some of the countermeasures they would like to see being part of this plan so we can really tackle safety on our network. So speed management practices, we did solicit examples from our local partners, reviewed other statewide efforts, but we're going to be relying heavily on a lot of national best practices just because this is an emerging specialization in safety And when you combine it with the Vision Zero program, it really is a new territory that we're really going down. So, but there's a lot of information already available at the federal level. USDOT has had speed management program plan available that could guide us. And this is how we formulated the scope. And now we started down this path. And one of the tasks that we had to do as part of the Vision Zero action plan, you know, there was identification already of the top 20 high injury network corridors. Those are the highest injury corridors or the deadliest corridors we have in our county right now. So the question was, how do we tackle them? How do we prioritize them besides just looking at the crash severity in these corridors? So we looked at a whole bunch of factors. Severity, equity, focus on pedestrian crashes, proximity to schools, and so forth. And I'll talk about that in a second. So one of the first steps that we took in this process, considering that from a Vision Zero speed matters most, and this is speed management study, we did a quick assessment as to just even looking at the posted speeds on all of these deadly corridors. So the table shows all the top 20 corridors on the left-hand side. We put together, you know, the context classification appropriate for that. For the 7 of those corridors, we looked at the posted speed limit and we compared it to national best practices. And what we found, not surprising, but surprising at the same time. 70% of these high injury corridors have posted speeds in excess of national practice by a minimum of 5 to 10 miles per hour. And another 15% on top of that have posted speeds of 15 to 20 miles an hour above national practices. Okay, this is very important because if someone is hit at 40 miles an hour or higher, the chances of survival are less than 20%, right? But yet, if at 20 miles an hour, the rate of survival hit by a non-coming vehicle, your rate of survival is closer to 90. So this is due to the lack of adequate reaction time that a driver has and lack of peripheral vision as a driver, the higher the speeds are. So please note, though, that most drivers travel an additional 5 to 10 miles per hour above the posted speed. So we have a problem, and we have a very serious one on our hands right now. So if we don't manage speed on our networks, and especially our highest, deadliest corridors in the county, then we'll never achieve Vision Zero. These are just some statistics on of the fatal crashes that we're seeing in the top 20 corridors in the county. You know, I'm going to pick just a couple of these. 60% happened in mid-block locations, not at intersections. So that's a significant difference, and we really have to start focusing on what is happening mid-block between intersections. 71% had aggressive driving, speed-related contributing factors as a result of these fatal crashes, you know, from erratic, reckless driving behavior, aggravated maneuvers, ran off the road, exceeded the speed limit. You pull all those together, and 71% of all the fatal crashes happen because of aggressive driving and speeding-related factors. And then another interesting fact that I want to point on the screen here is that 83% of the fatal crashes are happening off-peak. So if you can understand that, it's like during peak hours, we may have enough congestion on our streets that actually is managing speed. But the moment that congestion is gone during off-peak, we have excessive amount of width pavement on our streets, and hence probably much higher travel speeds, hence the higher crash and fatal crash statistics. So what we did with prioritization factors, we looked at some of the recommendations that the stakeholders had given to us. We looked at what data we had available, and we identified these 7 criteria or factors to look at and evaluate across all the corridors. What we did is we developed this risk performance level, you know, that simply states, you know, if the risk is high on the corridor, the higher the exposure rate for people using it, whether in a car or walking or cycling or taking transit, you know, the more likely the severity of the crashes that can occur, and hence the higher the points that we apply to these corridors, and hence the higher the priority. So in light of everything that is also going on in our country, I wanted to make sure that you are aware that one of these factors is equity. And we have factored in one of the columns that I'll show you in the next slide is about equity in our communities of concern and how some of these corridors touch on that. You know, how many schools per mile, how many ped bike crashes per mile are happening on these corridors, how many transit routes were some of these high arterial corridors, and probably of higher risk because they have now a lot of pedestrians getting off of the transit vehicles and so forth. We did all of that. We came up with this average, as you see on this table, we came up with a weighted average for all of these factors. And we then prioritized them based on high, medium, and low. And what we found is the highest ranked corridors of the top 20 include intersection or corridors such as Brandon Boulevard, Hillsborough Avenue, Fletcher Avenue, Dale Mabry, Bruceby Downs, Sheldon, Kennedy, and Florida. So that's how we prioritized the top 20. Through the process, our stakeholders, including the county representatives, they're saying, you know, in the state, some of these corridors are already under evaluation. What's the next step? What are the next top 30 high injury corridors that we should already start thinking about and planning ahead for? So we did just that. We went back to the drawing board and we identified the next top 30 corridors. So this is a very long list, and some of you may not be able to read all of this, but it includes, you know, more corridors across the county, such as MLK, Big Bend Road, Bush Boulevard, extensions of Hillsborough Avenue from one side of the county all the way to the other side. It introduces Waters Avenue, Progress Boulevard, Memorial Highway, and a whole bunch of these other, you know, high crash corridors. So when you look at the map, the blue is the top 20 that was previously identified through Vision Zero, and the green are the next 30 corridors. So when you look at this, that map pretty much covers a lot of the major corridors in our county. So we have a lot of work to do, and we have to start now. So that's my urgency and expression to everybody. We also did the same thing. We went through this prioritization matrix for all of these next 30 corridors, the same process. And we actually identified a few more corridors that actually ranked higher than a couple of the ones that are on the top 20. But overall, these are all deserving of attention and investment of funding to really look at what is truly happening in these corridors and how can we fix it. The next section now, I'm going to really talk about strategies and countermeasures, and then we'll go into actions. But before we do that, I need to remind everybody that from a Vision Zero principle, safety is complex, and it's not, you're not going to come up with a silver bullet that's going to fix everything, right? We have to talk about safe streets, we have to talk about safe speeds, we have to talk about safe vehicles, and we have to talk about safe people. And that is pretty important. You know, when you think that a third of the U.S. population does not drive, especially our most vulnerable, you know, children, the elderly, the disabled, and so forth, safe people should be our first priority, because if you focus on making it safe for them, we're going to have much greater outcomes, positive outcomes of improving walkability, livability, connectivity, not only to services, to jobs, to schools, and to parks. So with that said, you know, we developed this aggressive driving crash countermeasures toolkit, and I'm going to show you a whole bunch of tables now, and these have been broken down into those boxes. So if you wanted to save people walking or for bicycling or for transit users, here's this list of things that we really need to think about. We also looked at, you know, what type or area type do these countermeasures, are they relatable to an urban environment, you know, suburban environment, or rural? Do they apply in rural context? Sometimes, or most of the time, they don't. Location, is it appropriate in an intersection? Is it appropriate in a slow street, which are neighborhood streets, or are they appropriate in arterials and major corridors like these crash corridors that we're dealing with? So for example, in this table, when it comes to safe people, we're talking about looking at raised crossings, wider sidewalks, you know, minimum, I even put on the table, 8-foot minimum, especially after all the lessons we've learned through this COVID pandemic, refuge islands, pedestrian crossings, bike lanes separated and protected, shade trees, all sorts of countermeasures that we felt were very appropriate to the conditions we're dealing with here. The next table was focused on safe streets. You know, These include traffic calming techniques, narrow travel lanes, roundabouts, raised intersections, eliminating acceleration lanes, which we found so many of them, especially in some of these corridors. Making sure that we have adequate street lighting, because if it's dark and it's pitch black, you won't be able to see somebody waiting at a bus stop or trying to cross from a bus stop. Two-way streets, reevaluation, context class, and of course target speed are always at the bottom of each one of these tables to make sure that we are focused on the context of that corridor within each community. That table on complete streets or safe streets continues. We found that there's this little nuance in a lot of these corridors that we actually have freeway interchanges touching down on some of these community corridors. You know, and we looked at them, you know, how can we relook at these locations and make sure that not only do we have consistent pedestrian connectivity through them, that bicycle facilities are not provided through a lot of these mega high-speed freeway interchanges. You know, so the bottom half, we identified on this table safe traffic operations. You know, how we're dealing on these corridors from a smart cities component. You know, what is the technology that we can apply there to manage speed better? So introduction of more traffic signals, not only to connect intersections, but break up the long lanes where we have no traffic control devices whatsoever. And that also allows for pedestrians and bicyclists to be able to cross some of these major corridors with 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 lanes like Brandon Boulevard. So, and then the last toolkit is really on targeted enforcement and education campaigns and PSAs. And we've listed a whole bunch of ideas in here, but when we talk about targeted enforcement in these areas, we're really pushing for automated speed enforcement, mobile speed camera enforcement, red light cameras, and so forth. But those will take longer time periods to institute and make sure that we can use them in certain locations, but it's on this list and we have to start working towards something that is more effective in managing speeds on our networks. So now this section, you have the packet in front of you. Every one of the actions that we identified various ways to get to that action. And it's comprehensive and it's very lengthy. I think they were a total of 26 slides. I'm simply going to touch on what those actions were for how to set speeds for engineering and operations and enforcement, policy and legislative, and then evaluation. So feel free to ask me any questions on the details later, but I want to get through these as quickly as I can. So when we talk about setting speed, that's one of the things that I said right from the beginning. We have a conflict of the posted speeds on these corridors versus the classification and the context of where they are in our communities. But regional context classification has to be done, and it has to be done for all levels of streets, from state to county to city. We know that state has already done them on quite a few of the corridors. County is working on them. And we have to continue that process. And then we have to make that information readily available, and we have to make sure that it's consistent with future land use plans, especially in a growth area like Tampa and Hillsborough, where there is a lot of development going on and conditions do change. Talk about reevaluating all the projects that we have. You know, what is it, you know, about a project that may be just in concept right now, concept development right now, that needs to be changed in order to manage speed more effectively? Projects that are already in engineering or projects that are about to be started construction. We need to seriously start evaluating how we're doing our projects and make sure that we're not putting infrastructure out there today that doesn't meet the needs of the safety aspects of this community. One of the things you'll see on these presentation slides as well, I've color-coded them. So the orange refers to short-term projects that can be done quickly in the next couple of years, mid-term projects and long-term projects. And the long-term, I think I only have a couple of them listed. Does not mean that we're not going to start on them for 5+ years from now. It just means it may take a lot longer for us to actually see some movement on them or actually outcomes coming from it. So we did the same thing for engineering and operations. For that category, we had 8 separate actions, you know, starting to work on the top 50 and at least coming up with preliminary recommendations so we could start putting in on the LRTP, putting it on the TIP. and so forth. Update design of the manuals and design standards. We found that in Florida specifically, we have what at the national level would be guidelines, but in Florida there's standards. And when you turn something into a standard, unless you meet that, you can't put it in. And it creates a bottleneck for putting in a lot of these wonderful countermeasures, because we should be out there being proactive and preventing crashes and deaths instead of reactive waiting for deaths to occur before we can put a sidewalk on a crossing or a painted crossing. So I'm not going to go through all of these. A lot of the details is right in your package. This other one, education enforcement, we are talking about educating the public about the importance of speed management, educating the practitioners like myself and others. This is the change, especially when you're talking about it from a Vision Zero standpoint. We have to educate our elected officials. We have to adopt speed management policy, to make sure that it becomes ingrained in everything that our agencies are doing. And of course, develop education, PSA messages, but also establish equitable enforcement practices. And we are going to be looking through the language that we have in that, and we'll make sure that it is equitable to be sensitive to everything that is happening in our communities today. The last slide, it's not the last slide, policy and legislation. As professionals, we often don't deal with this side of the equation, but it's so important. We must start to support changes to laws and regulations that truly ensure that people are protected to the greatest extent possible. Set firm Vision Zero crash reduction goals. I don't care what's happening in 2045. We should be setting goals that are more aggressive. In the next 5 to 10 years, we should be reducing all of our fatalities by 50%. We need to be more assertive in something, of dealing with the safety aspect that we have in our community, but we also have to fund it, right? So we have to prioritize differently from what you just heard in the presentation from Sarah. It's like, those are all great, but it's like we need to inject more safety countermeasures or safety metrics in there to make sure that these programs and these projects get elevated long before you add more new infrastructure. So, and the last one on the actions is really then plan evaluation, right? We should have quarterly updates to the management plan, and we really should look at qualitative and quantitative approaches, including speed reduction in a lot of these quarters, from the posted speed to the actual operating speeds, the reductions in serious injury and fatality crashes, impact on travel time, number of quarters that are being proactively or reactively being addressed as part of this. So we have to look at all of this and really start pushing for greater change in order to save lives in our community. So to wrap up, stakeholder group has reviewed the draft plan. We actually wrote all this in the simple words that I've given you today into a document. We hope to finalize that really quickly. Hopefully most of the comments will be minor, but we are asking you today, based on everything you've seen in your extended package and the quick overview I've just given you, we request your approval of the speed management action plan and to be forwarded to the MPO board for their approval. With that said, that's my cliff notes of that extensive plan, and I'm ready to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Paula. That's a really interesting and excellent approach. A lot of these things feed back into bicycle safety, which is obviously what we're here for. And once again, thank you very much for a great presentation. I'd like to go ahead and move forward with getting a motion to approve.
So moved. Sally.
Second?
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 This is Sharon. I need to know who seconded.
Say again?
This is Sharon. I need to know who was the second motion.
It was Holly.
Thank you.
Okay. All those opposed?
Oh, apologies. Please go ahead.
I was going to say, all opposed, like sign. So it appears unanimous.
Jim, we did have one note from Frank to leave the meeting. He just wanted to point out that Matt Lewis and the county's comprehensive planning group did add it to the Livable Roadways Committee record that Hillsborough County is in the process of developing a context classification as part of the transportation element of the comp plan that includes future land use as well as existing land use, which FDOT largely uses, and that they will lead to land development regulations and context sensitive cross sections for roads that will help promote safety. So he just wanted to note that they are also working on that in coordination.
Okay.
And
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Ramirez.
I have a question for Paula. I'm very involved with the Save Routes to School programs, and the Save Routes to School national program has recently removed the enforcement word from their 5Es, and I'm just recommending to please check that and the reasoning behind if you have to make any modifications with that word in the document. That's it.
Agreed. There's been a lot happening in our communities across the nation, and that Safe Routes to School was the first one to remove enforcement from all their programs, and we're looking at that carefully. I know that other bicycle advocacy groups are doing the same thing, and that's why we want to also pause and take a minute and a breather and make sure that our enforcement tactics that we have and actions that we have identified are equitable and don't cause a bigger problem. So thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Wade. Are we done with this element?
Just wanted to note one more question from Ms. Simmons, who asked Paula if there has been any movement from a policy perspective on allowing more technological enforcement and whether these need to happen at the state level. And I believe the answer is yes, that we would need to have legislation at the state level to allow speed cameras or other automatic enforcement devices.
Correct, and that's a complicated issue, and that's one of the recommendations that I think a little bit further off in terms of time is related to this plan because of that complexity. It's not something that you can do or any agency locally can do right now, but there is significant national information on the benefits of automated enforcement, and that's what that is. It's using technology for calming traffic down and giving tickets where needed. And that needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of work locally and statewide to start using them. And some of the communities that have been most are very effective at using that has been by directing it to where we have the high injury networks. So if people are dying on these corridors, why can't we have better enforcement tools, especially technology, to try to minimize that? And also they're doing that around schools where there's just as big a problem. So little by little, it can be integrated into state legislation, but we have to start looking at it, and I'm just saying we need to start now rather than tomorrow.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
And Alex, I believe I can make you the presenter if you're ready. Or I have the presentation. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Fantastic.
All right. Can everybody see my the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All righty. I'll try to go through this fairly quickly because I know we're running over time. But good evening, everybody. My name is Alex Henry. I'm the Bicycle Pedestrian Public Involvement Coordinator for FQT District 7. And this evening, I'm just going to be giving a brief update on the update of the Florida Transportation Plan and our strategic highway safety plan that are currently underway. Basically, I'll just be giving a high-level overview of what those plans are, the processes that go into updating them, the things that we're looking at, and then some opportunities for you all to get involved and provide some input. So what is the FTP? Basically, it is the single overarching plan for all of Florida that is meant to guide Florida's transportation future. It provides a policy guidance which establishes a framework that guides all of our planning programs and activities. So kind of everything we do flows back to what's established in the FTP, which in turn influences the projects that are ultimately programmed into our 5-year work program. Why does the FTP matter? So a few things that have been pretty substantial that have come out of previous FTP updates. Notably in our 2000 update, that gave to the creation of the Strategic Intermodal System, our Psas, which has kind of completely revolutionized the way that we plan for and prioritize and fund large projects of regional importance. Definitely a kind of a landmark update that came along with an FTP update. Increased focusing on regional visioning and collaboration, alignment with things like economic development plans and trade. And then our most recent FTP update, our current FTP, the one that we're on now, introduced concepts of resilience, which we're building on this FTP, as we'll talk about a little bit. Workforce development, which we're starting to get going on some of our projects, our large projects here in the Tampa Bay area. And also choices. So basically a focus on providing choices other than the traditional single occupancy automobile, which we've seen kind of permeate through a lot of our policies around the state in the last 5 years, such as the creation of our Complete Streets Plan and things like that. So the things that come out of these plans really do make a difference and have really changed the way that we do business here in Florida. The FTP has 3 major elements. First of all, the vision element, which looks out 50 years into the future, and basically highlights major trends, uncertainties, and themes that we think have the potential to shape the future transportation of Florida during that time period. The policy element, which is really kind of the meat and potatoes of the FTP, looks out to a 25-year horizon, kind of lining up the timelines of MPO, LRTP process. And what this does is it establishes specific goals and objectives that guides our decision makings on long-range plans and investments. Kind of comes up with strategies of how we're going to be addressing some of those trends that we've identified in our vision elements. And then our implementation element, which looks a little shorter term, 5 to 25 years, so basically everything that's outside of our 5-year work program, up to 25 years, and is kind of focused on more specific strategies and programs that we can implement as a DOT to start getting us closer to some of those goals and objectives that we've established in the policy element. The plan is being updated in coordination with a 34-member steering committee that is a diverse group comprising of representatives from all types of different organizations. We have governmental organizations from federal, state, and the local level, as well as non-governmental partners such as ARP. So they are tasked with kind of providing their diverse and unique perspectives to help guide the formulation of the plan and making sure that we're considering all kinds of different perspectives and interests as we go about developing this plan. In addition to the main steering committee, we also have 3 separate subcommittees that comprise of members of the larger steering committee. We have an automated, connected electric and shared vehicle subcommittee that is basically looking at the impacts of emerging technologies and business practices. ABCB, definitely a huge part of that. A resiliency subcommittee that is basically looking at potential disruptors, whether those be weather or climate disruptors or economic or even operational disruptors, and just kind of looking at ways that we can bake into the plan to absorb, withstand, and recover from unanticipated or external disruptors like that. So that's continuing to be a huge focus as part of this plan update. And then, as we'll talk about a little later, safety. So our strategic highway safety plan is being updated in coordination with this, and we're looking for opportunities to incorporate and bake in safety into all the other aspects of the plan as well. these are the goals that we have established so far that will be guiding this FTP update. They're largely consistent with the goals that were established in previous FTP updates, with just some refined language based on feedback from our steering committee to kind of help beef up the language and be a little more specific and targeted with what we're trying to accomplish. So, for instance, in the last FTP update, one of the goals was more transportation choices for people and free. So in this update, we've really refined that to transportation choices that improve accessibility and equity. So choices are still a priority, but kind of getting a little more into the essence of why they're a priority and why we're doing what we're doing. And that, hoping that'll kind of help guide some of the future discussions. Across all 7 goals, we have identified these 4 kind of cross-cutting topics that seem to be coming up over and over again and hitting on all of our, sorry, I lost my presentation, that are cross-cutting and kind of come up on all of our discussions of our different goals. Technology, which is again looking at the introduction of automated connected vehicles, smart cities and ITS, transportation system management, how we can leverage technology to better maintain the capacity that we have, as well as new materials and processing that are starting to influence shipping. Resilience, we touched on a little bit, basically looking at how we can be responsive to external disruptors on our transportation system. And then state and interregional and regional local, which kind of delve into issues related to our transportation system as an interregional facility, so providing access and travel between regions, and then also focusing on more of those regional local concerns, land use and community planning, the environment, economic development, things like that. So again, these are 4 of the areas that we're really focusing on and keying in as we work to develop our specific goals and objectives for this plan. And we're really interested in getting your feedback on why you think these things are important, what you think we should be looking at in respect to these, and how you think that these topics have potential to shape our future. So we've actually created online surveys for each 4 of these cross-cutting topics, which we included links to in the agenda packet, and I'll show a link to our main plan website as well. So if you have a chance, I would encourage you to check that out and have your voice heard. So what do we do with your input? We're gathering input from a few different ways, through those surveys that I just mentioned, through presentations like this. So any feedback or questions that you may have in the presentation, I'm writing all down and shipping up the central office where they're compiling it and feeding the feedback to our steering committees. We're also planning a regional workshop where the public and regional stakeholders will be invited to have a more kind of centralized workshop type setting to talk about the development of the plan. We were hoping to do that next month, but due to complications from COVID-19, that's a little bit on pause, but we're hoping we'll have more to report on that soon and have something, whether it be in a virtual format or whatever, hopefully sometime in the fall. So stay tuned on that. But basically all the information and feedback that we compile from all those different sources gets fed to the steering committee, who then reviews all the comments and feedback and kind of uses that to help factor in their decision making as they're steering the direction of the plan. And then that feedback eventually gets fed into the plan itself. So again, your information, your feedback is appreciated and valued, and we're looking to get as many different perspectives and as much different information as we can. I'll spend the rest of the presentation talking really quickly about the update to our strategic highway safety plan. So as you may know, our statewide target for fatalities and serious injuries is 0. You know, we feel as a state that this is the only acceptable goal, and that one traffic fatality or serious injury is too many. However, obviously we all know, we all see the news and know our crash trends, and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to reach this vision. And what the strategic highway safety plan does is it really provides us with a roadmap of how we're going to get there, how we're going to drive down those fatalities and our serious injuries towards 0. So it acts as a statewide coordinated safety plan that provides that comprehensive framework for reducing those fatalities and serious injuries on all public roads, so both on state roads and on local roads as well, and identifies key safety needs that help guide investment towards strategies and countermeasures with the most potential to save lives. As I mentioned, we have a whole specific subcommittee dedicated to the update of the Highway Safety Plan, and these are the organizations that are on there. Again, a good mixture of federal, state, and a consortium of local governments, as well as some private sector and nonprofit partners as well, providing their unique perspectives on some of our safety issues. What goes into the plan update? Basically, the first thing that we do, and I'll touch a little bit on the highlights of this, are we do a big high-level crash analysis of the whole state over a period of time to try to identify those common trends and themes that seem to be really driving up the number of fatalities and serious injuries. From there, we kind of look at that data and develop emphasis areas based on those trends, and then develop strategies and actions based on that to try to come up with data-driven, proven countermeasures to address those. So that's the stage we're at right now in the plan update. We've identified the emphasis areas, which I'll show in a minute, and right now the steering committee is talking about what are the appropriate strategies and actions to help us address those emphasis areas. So again, it's a great time right now if you have any thoughts or opinions on what we should be looking at, or what you think is really driving some of the crash trends that we're about to discuss. Now is a great time to provide that feedback. From there, we also provide a review of all the input that we've received through the FTP process to make sure that we're being consistent with that, coordinating with local plans to make sure that what we're recommending jives what is being looked at from a safety standpoint in the local levels before it's eventually approved. So quick look at our fatality trends over the course of the last several years that we're evaluating as part of this plan update. Unfortunately, we have seen an uptick in the number of fatalities statewide since 2012. It's flatlined a little bit in the last few years. 2018 is the last year that we have full official data from, but obviously that's still too high and we have a lot of work to do. Some of the major takeaways from that high-level crash data analysis that we discussed, it found that most fatalities and serious injuries involved folks within the 20 to 35-year-old age group, but that drivers 65 and up were more likely to be killed or seriously injured when involved in crashes. And teen drivers, although more likely to be involved in crashes, were much less likely to be killed or seriously injured. It found that the highest number of fatalities occurred in urban areas. However, the highest fatality rates, so basically when you factor in how much traffic, those highest rates happened in rural areas where we typically see high speed, lack of lighting, a lot of runoff road crashes, things like that. Most fatalities and serious injuries did happen on state-maintained roads, and most intersection-related fatalities and serious injuries occurred at four-way or T intersections, which certainly makes sense. More fatalities occurred at night, with about half on lighted facilities, or otherwise about half on unlighted facilities, which is definitely an opportunity. And interestingly, more serious injury crashes occurred during the day. And then finally, most crashes involving a fatality or serious injury occurred when the weather is clear. So it infers that wet conditions aren't a major driving influencer in these fatal and severe crashes. These are the emphasis areas that we, the steering committee identified as a result of that data dig. So as you can see, it looks at not only specific types of crashes, such as ped bike or intersection related or lane departure, but it also looks at some of those key demographics that we discussed in the previous slide. So aging road users, teen drivers. So looking at different types of trends, and like I mentioned, from here, we'll kind of be doing a good discussion on what are the specific goals and objectives for each of these that we could really be focusing our resources on to help drive those crashes down. And then the last thing, I just wanted to give a little more overview from that crash deep dive that we did. So this is just kind of a some perspective of those emphasis areas that we just highlighted, kind of what those crash trends have been from this update period based on the time period that we're looking at with our last plan update. As you can see, for most of the emphasis areas, we've seen a slight reduction in the number of serious injuries. However, for the majority of the emphasis areas, fatalities have been increasing, which is consistent with some of the Hillsborough County specific safety data that was presented several months back when we were establishing our safety targets. So we're seeing the same thing statewide, unfortunately, which definitely means there's a lot of important work still to be done. Additional resources, these are links to sites on the website. You can view the information from all the subcommittee meetings, elect to get added onto their mailing list so that you receive those meeting invites and receive all the meeting materials as well, so you can stay up to date with the discussions that are happening there. The survey links are also available on the website, as well as a bunch of different kind of complementary information talking about a lot of those cross-cutting topics that we discussed. So that is all I had. I know I blew through that really quickly, but I'd be happy to take any questions or comments that the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's a great presentation. And it emphasizes what we were talking about earlier about resilience. We're having a test of our resilience right now in terms of COVID-19.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is interesting thinking about it, going back to those cross-cutting topics too. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It hits resilience, it hits technology, a lot of different transportation angles kind of being brought to light by our recent challenges. Good point, Jim.
Jim, this is Wade. If there are no other comments on this, I wanted to suggest we are at 7:45. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Alvaro, I hate to push you off, but we could certainly try to come back with the induced traffic demand in August, or we could certainly continue tonight, whatever the committee's will is.
I'd be in favor of adding this to the August program.
I agree.
Okay, well, hearing no objection to that, if it's okay with you, Jim, I do have a couple of items under old and new business.
Sure.
Great. One thing that has recently been added, there are some City of Tampa mural projects that are happening on June 27th. That is a Saturday morning. There are 4 locations. One is in West Shore, one is in downtown, one is in East Tampa at, I believe, 15th and 21st Street, and one is in West Tampa. I can certainly forward the information on those items to you. The Tri-County BPAC, it is Pinellas hosting the next meeting this fall in September. They've suggested September 15th and having an afternoon meeting and ride at Brooker Creek Preserve. I know we have generally liked the evening meetings for participation, but they only have access to the preserve during those afternoon hours. So I just wanted to get any feedback on that that the committee might have. We can certainly go ahead and just sort of get that on the books, and hopefully people will be able to make it even if it is an afternoon meeting. We could also consider doing something after that as a Hillsborough only group if we wanted to postpone our July recess, which is the other item I had. So I don't know if, or I said July recess, rather we typically have a workshop. And since we are not all able to get together in person, would the committee like to have that workshop virtually? Would we like to recess in July and try to do that workshop at some other time, such as in coordination with the Tri-County BPAC in September?
Wade, this is Jim. My concern right now is that we may still be observing social distancing by September. This thing is not going away, and I think we need to have an alternative for not meeting face to face.
What about July? What were you thinking about July, Jim?
I think a virtual or a go-to-meeting workshop would be just fine. It seems like we're getting better at doing this.
Well, then we can plan on having a virtual workshop on the date that it is scheduled, which I believe is July 8th.
Sounds good.
And we'll just move forward with that. For the Tri-County, as you said, we don't know where we'll be in September.
Hey, Wade, it's Peter Davitt. This being my first year around, I started in August. What goes on in July that's different than the other 11 months?
Typically just an informal discussion of priorities that the committee might want to try to bring before the MPO board, or just an informal discussion of any issues people would like on those or
Okay, it's just I don't know, less formal than what we're doing now, I guess, is what it is.
Yes, sir, and with no action items for the board.
That's always good. Thank you.
Can I ask the question? Hello? Am I on?
Yes.
It's not a question. I just happened to be driving down Bayshore and I noticed that the light's being put up at, is it Euclid?
Yes, that's correct. And Rome is coming as well.
I hadn't been in that part, but I saw the light. That was the first time I'd noticed the light going up, being constructed or whatever. So that.
I don't know if the city of Tampa would like to address that, but yes, they're moving quickly on that. I noticed that myself. I guess with that being said, tentatively, we will, if this is okay with the group, tentatively I will let Pinellas County know that we are sort of waiting to see what happens by September, and we may need to push that meeting out or have a virtual option for it. And I think we should have a virtual option anyway.
Okay.
And we'll have our workshop next month. The other item that was on the agenda was the Tampa Velodrome idea, which Calvin Thornton brought to us. There are only a couple of velodromes in the southeast, the closest, I believe, being in Atlanta or Fort Lauderdale, if I'm not mistaken. So this would cover a very large area, and it is an Olympic sport, and something that if the committee was interested, we could probably bring back we could bring back more information on it and give you a presentation on what it is and sort of what it takes to construct something like this.
Yeah, I really like the idea of a velodrome because Atlanta has one, and it tends to be part of every Olympics and a lot of World Games. Just our velodrome champ, Leo Rogers, parenthetically, is moving to Costa Mesa, California to work for Specialized Bicycling. So we wouldn't have to build a velodrome for Leo, but maybe there are some other people that could get some national recognition if we had a velodrome for them to work out on.
Well, thank you, Jim. That's certainly something we can bring back with a more formal presentation.
Great. And Calvin's always got something good to say, so listen for that.
All right. Well, that was all I had, Mr. Chair. I believe if there's nothing else from the committee, you're welcome to move forward to adjourn.
Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for their patience, and I'll see you in July virtually, and I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Night, guys.
Good night.
Night.
Night.